I'm joined by the amazing Allison O'Toole, Dan Price, Andre Owen, Fred Kennedy, Chip Zdarsky. Chip, thanks for coming.
What's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews, and joining me today is the wonderful, the handsome Levi Corey. Levi, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I was really looking forward to this.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. You come my way by recommendation of Adrian Kalarick out in Alberta Way, a lovely Canadian creator. Much appreciated. So, Levi, just to start the show, plain, simple, and easy, my first favorite question for the folks at home who have never seen your face, never heard your name, who is Levi Corey?
Well, I'm a writer, first and foremost, in this space. I started out back in the early 2000s working in film, working in theater, and I had done some work, screenwriting, directing. I had gotten an opportunity to write, direct, and produce a film, and then I from there kind of moved into doing some writing for television and segue towards the last 5 years or so. I got really interested into writing graphic novels, and sort of took a shot at that with my brother. We kickstarted a project called the Book of Ecroy, and kind of from that project was able to connect with some other folks and gain some resources, and pitched this book that I'm working on now, the Order of the Circle, to Dead Sky Publishing, and they really loved the concept and put together the team, and was able to show proof of concept with them, and they loved it and were ready to go. We got a deal contract with them, and we went to work, and we're here now, about to release next week. So really excited to come on the program, talk about the project, and get an opportunity to delve into all stuff Order of the Circle. I love talking about it. I love sharing the stories. People worked really hard on the book, and it's exciting to get it coming out. Dead Sky Publishing is a new-ish publishing company. They were publishing more novels in like the horror space, and then they kind of branched out. And they branched out and added their sort of comics division, their graphic novels comic book division. It's led by Steve Wands, and they've probably been publishing now for about a year in the comic book space. So had a chance to kind of develop that a little bit, and we're coming out with our book now on the 18th.
Love it. 6 days away.
Yes.
I am so glad you're so passionate about it, because it's this really cool thing that you've done. I don't, whether it's your first comic, which, as you've mentioned, it is definitely not, or I don't know, your 80th comic. The fact that you're excited about it, the fact that you want to share it, that part I dig, because you're passionate, and I think that counts and goes a very long way. When it comes to the book itself, The Order of the Circle on paperback from Amazon, and actually I will drop the link in the comments so that folks out there on Instagram, Twitch, and I will pop it in on YouTube as well. There we go. Brain just stalled out. We have someone on Instagram. It looks like their birthday is the 18th. So maybe
nice.
So it's a nice little birthday gift.
Little present gift, yeah.
Yeah. So just to start with, then, the book itself, Order of the Circle. Let's see if I can't bring it up. Am I going to share entire screen? No, that's probably a bad idea. All right, well, the share screen option is giving me a blank field where there should be Amazon, so we're going to try that. Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. So this is the Amazon page for it. I'm just going to zoom in so people can see the nice cover.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll zoom back out so that way people can go and find it and purchase it for themselves, maybe for a birthday gift. They can do the pre-order right now, paperback or Kindle. So, Levi, for the folks out there who've never heard of this book, as passionately as you can, which clearly won't be hard, what is it? What's it about?
For sure. You know, elevator pitch is really important, right? You know, a lot of times they tell you if you can't really pitch the concept within a couple of sentences, then, you know, it's not probably going to be a good story. And, you know, even as a writer, you know, the pitches, they don't come easy to people, right? So when you think about this story, really there's a lot going on here. You know, we wanted to put together a fairly large world that was something that could be able to encompass multiple storylines and concepts. And with this, you know, we wanted to do magic, this idea of magic and what magic could be in a society kind of similar to ours. So it has a historical fiction element in that way, where it's a similar world to where we are now, and go back to 1952 and set it in London, and then have this concept and idea where magic users is this ancient society, this order, and they are they're the part of the political system, they're part of the law enforcement, they're part of the healthcare. And so you can imagine mages and witches, you know, creating spells to heal the sick people. They're using magic as a way to enforce the law. So one of the examples in the book is, you know, if you commit a murder, then they're going to summon a demon and they're going to drag you to hell, because that's the punishment for murder, right? So the oppressive nature of that type of hierarchy of how, you know, they handle crime, it you know, was just this interesting idea of magic in sort of a real world way of using it to kind of integrate into society in a particular way, and it become a part of how the world was. So from there, you know, we wanted to tell the story more as a sort of like on a micro level, where let's take a character who's affected by this order, or who has to react to something that the order has done, and let's follow that character, right? So enter Dorothy. Dorothy is when the story starts, she's muted by the Order of the Circle, meaning in speaking out against them, they put a mute spell on her, which closes her mouth so she can't speak. So she starts off the story muted, and she's seeking revenge for what she feels like is the wrongful accusation of her husband as a murderer. So they drug her husband to hell. They muted her so that she couldn't speak. She has all of the information that she needs to try and you know, get out information that's against the circle, in order to prove that, you know, that they're corrupt and they have all these issues, and they silence her. And now she's trying to get revenge on not only just the circle, but the demon that also drug her to hell. So that's not the best elevator pitch, I know, but it's a complicated story, and it kind of demands just a little bit more intention in trying to understand all the things at play here. And ultimately, you know, when you look at the world and then you look at the story of this character within the world, you know, you should, as you read through, kind of get these like little hints and concepts of the bigger pieces and the bigger parts of everything, and at the same time follow this one character through trying to navigate what revenge is for like a normal person.
100%. And I mean, what for me, the story itself is, like, at its most base roots, fairly simple story, right? Like you said, it's a revenge tale where this woman's partner has been, well, I mean, killed, dragged to hell, in a very cool way, and they're out for vengeance. At the baseline, it's been done, but what I think the coolest thing is the fact that she's muted. And the way that she's muted, by the way, is wonderful and grotesque. And
Great.
the nerd in me was like, wait a minute, but I have technical questions. But then I was
Uh-huh.
like, Conrad, just shut up and enjoy the book. And like the fact that she wears this mask when she's out in public, I highly enjoyed that. The presence of this individual, who the folks at home, whether they're watching with us live now or sometime in the future, will learn all about, well, both of them, but this gentleman here, the way she interacts with him, the way that her speech bubbles work. I found that, I don't want this to sound weird, mechanically interesting.
Okay.
Because, as you said, she's muted, so she cannot speak. So the fact that her words come out at all, at first I found very interesting. And the whole process of her journey, I really liked it. I particularly enjoyed the way that sort of magic, the idea of this magic society works within this book, in the way that in the world that you set up. And I have a couple of questions regarding it. But I guess my main question, and sort of later on in the book, people would see this, so I'm going to try to avoid spoilers as best I can. But later on, we see some of the henchmen of this society, and the way that they're dressed is sort of in line with how I would expect someone in a medieval society to be dressed. And yet it's 1952. Abigail here, we can see, even for 52, she's actually dressed really modernly. She's wearing pants and things like that. But these two don't exactly look like they would fit in today, clothing wise. And the way that the antagonists dress, the sort of the higher, more regal way that they do it, I found fascinating. So I guess just to start with, what made you want to go with that contrast of different sort of time periods, given the complex nature of the fact that these people are magic users or witches, at least the females of them, and then how that impacted sort of clothing?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. And it was intentional, right? You want to look at how the reader sees things. And with the bubbles, I also want to talk about that bubble too, because the bubbles are intentional there, as well. The design of those. When it comes to the clothing, one of the concepts that the artist and I kind of talked about was how has the circle advanced throughout history, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're building the world, you're looking at the world and you want to quite maybe tell stories in other aspects of the world at another time, right? So after this series, if you want to do another series, so you try to think outside that box. And it's also good for world building to just kind of know history, know facts, know where the circle has gone since its inception. And so
Yeah.
within that timeline, like, how difficult it is, like if you look at police uniforms, okay, or you look at how in a society certain uniforms, government uniforms, certain things like that have developed over time. And you don't necessarily see a lot of advances in how the clothing looks, maybe until recently within the last, 2 or 3 decades, you see military uniforms change pretty significantly in terms of camo and what they're made out of and that kind of stuff. But technologically, I think, especially back in the 50s, I think there was a long period of time where you wouldn't see a lot of technological advances in clothing, right? And so
Mhm.
the idea that there was still sort of a medieval feel to some of the characters of this order would still let the reader know and see that this is a pretty ancient group, right? And they've
Mhm.
been around for a long time, and there hasn't, the uniforms that they're wearing is very distinct and put them in a situation to be very recognizable in public. So you know who the cops are, you know who the
Oh yeah.
doctors are, you know who the leaders are, and this idea of kind of cloaked society, it's it's in every one of these magic stories, and even not in some of the magic stories, there's cloak societies, right? So you do want to play on some of the tropes, some of the stereotypes of certain things, because especially if you're doing a graphic novel, you have an automatic reaction or association to that, and so that was one of the reasons why we chose those clothing concepts. And then with the bubbles, real quick,
Yeah, here, let me bring it back up.
the idea of the bubbles, her being muted, there, we do see this as a trilogy. So, we do hope to be able to do 2 more books. And
Ooh,
one of
good
the
to know.
concepts, yeah. One of the concepts with Dorothy was to be able to show Dorothy expressing herself in a lot of different ways. And whether that is a thought, whether that is a narration, whether that is her actual speaking, whether that is her speaking in another language, throughout the concept of the story, I wanted to literally play with voice and how voice would come across to a reader. Because if you're watching it as a film, it's definitely going to hit differently if you're hearing a thought or a narration, or you're hearing her actual voice, right? It in a film, it carries a certain weight. But for me, when I'm reading a graphic novel or I'm reading a comic book, when I see a self-expression or an expression of a character done in a different way, it engages you. Like you said, it has a different mechanism, or it's mechanically, it has a different feel or vibe.
Yeah.
And so I wanted the reader to vibe with it a little bit, and to it for a second just kind of think, okay, especially at the beginning, am I inside of her head? Like, where am I? And then the reveal to you then carries some different weight, and you're like, oh, okay, now I see where we are. And then because there's flashbacks, she speaks in flashbacks, so throughout the concept of the story, you do see her interacting with you as the reader in different ways. And that's definitely something we're exploring with this concept.
Perfect. I loved it. Firstly, over on YouTube, Ben Markham just ordered my copy. Thank you, Ben.
Very nice. Really good friend
Um,
of mine. Ben's a really good friend of mine, good supporter. Love that guy.
Wonderful. Ben, thanks for taking the time, man. Yeah, one of the things that I really enjoyed is because, and again, it's just within the first couple pages, so I will gladly show it again. We can see that when she communicates, it's in this blue, and we saw the mask. And again, I'll zoom in. Oh, it's like there we go. At first, I had thought, like within the first couple of statements, the blue is because she's got this thing over her mouth and it's covering, and I'm sure, I hope the mic's picking up the fact that my voice sounds different. And so I figured, maybe that's what that is. Maybe that's what's going on.
Interesting.
And then you see this, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. So that's what like sound is.
She's
And
making noises, right? Yeah, like a guttural noise, or she's making a sound for sure.
Yeah, so my brain started clicking it in differently, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a fun way to play with the medium of comics and sort of the standard way we think about it. And I guess when it comes to her being muted in the mask, obviously, anytime I see someone wearing a mask nowadays, you can't help but think about the pandemic and COVID. Interestingly, within this story, the world is also blanketed by sort of a smog that's just present. I can't not ask about it, because the moment, I think I was like halfway through, and I was like, oh, this is kind of like giving me the COVID vibes, and just the way that the political situation was going on and what people were having to do. It was like, okay, I sort of see or at least I feel something about what's going on here. So I wanted to ask the impact that COVID, the pandemic, or any of the more recent things that have happened, if that impacted your smog in the book, and things like that, or quite separately, if I'm wrong, because I love when I'm wrong, that particular part of the story, where did that come from?
Yeah, great questions. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of these concepts for this story came out of COVID, right? It's kind of hard to, it was such a big thing for a lot of people's lives,
Yeah.
and just the isolation that a lot of people had to deal with. And I think ultimately, when you're also pitching a story, to a publisher in this particular way, I wanted people to recollect to that time for sure. We wanted people. It's like when you're reading the book, there's COVID sort of associations, the isolation. Not everybody was going through an isolation issue, or having to deal with some personal things, or having to deal with professional things, whatever was happening to people during that time. But it just seemed like there were so many stories of personal sacrifices, personal endurance, having to deal with so many new dramas, issues, things that came up. And so the COVID connection is definitely there. And it was big in the pitch, because the smog was a real event that happened in London in 1952. So this is sort of a historical event, and it had a direct relationship to where we are now. You think of historically all of these revolving ideas, concepts. I mean, they say history repeats itself, to use that stereotype, right? And so I also wanted to go there. I also wanted to go to a history repeats itself moment, so that people could also remember, hey, this has happened before. The people have been oppressed by things where they've had to wear masks, because a lot of people died in London during this time, because of emphysema and because of issues. Their hospitals were overrun. There were a lot of concerns. They were shipping people out, right, of the city, because it was so bad and it was going on for so long. So there were a lot of similarities in that story. And so that's definitely why we wanted to do that. And, how each individual feels about mask wearing. Some people are pro-mask, some people are anti-mask, whatever. And so in that particular way, when reading the book, I kind of also wanted to create an association there. I wanted to create an association to people feeling about themselves. Would you wear a mask if there was soot everywhere? Would you walk around inhaling coal, or would you choose to wear a mask? Like, how do you feel about what the characters are going through, right? So it's association for the reader. 100%.
I dig it. Yeah, I really like that. Like, that was one of the things where when you see how the public, and again, like, there's not a ton of time focused on it, but it is very present, and makes itself known, sort of how as I said, the political situation is sort of moving people around, how they're like, hey, you should do this and this because of the smog. Like you said, in reality, in our world, very much it happened, and a lot of people died because of it. So I enjoyed that in the book. And I also found, because she's muted, she's unable to speak, because of that, the way that you've written her, with her reactions to other human beings, other people that sort of exist in her world, and the stress that she is under, much like in... Nope, I'm ahead of myself. Go back here, where she's clearly like struggling with undigging this grave that they're undigging. So the mannerisms that she... Oh, I appreciate that is not on screen. Hold on. Go back. So when she does stuff like this, where you can see without words the reaction that she's having, the physical toll that is taking on her, because she's very tired from digging, the sounds that she's able to make, those, like I said, sort of guttural, non-language sounds, as well as the mass expression on her face at just about all times. So really quick, I do want to absolutely mention, and now I have to go find Amazon again. Bear with me. The artist, and I'm going to try and say her name right. So it's Elizabeth McHeitzy. last name Mkheidze, is the amazing illustrator on this book, who has created such a moody world. And I mean, I think the way that this opens is incredible. Little reminiscent of Spawn, which I appreciate, with the sort of beaten up cemetery angel. Yeah, I highly enjoyed it. But yeah, like I was saying, one of the things that I enjoyed about Abigail so much is that without words, she's so expressive. So what were some of the challenges coming to write her, so that her struggle came across and then the reader feels it, without, I guess, going overboard? Or was that ever a concern?
And you mean Dorothy? I'm sorry, you were saying.
Yes, my apologies.
Abigail,
Yes,
Dorothy.
Dorothy,
I just
not
wanted to make
Abigail.
sure. Yeah. Can you ask that one more time?
Yes, I appreciate a lot of words.
Yeah, no problem.
The way that without words that Dorothy communicates to the world, to those noises, the struggle, the physical motions and movements that she has to go through, especially later on, some of the stuff she has to do. What were some of the challenges in writing her this way, so that it clearly communicated to the reader what she was feeling without maybe going overboard on it?
Yeah, no, great question. Well, the first thing you do is you find a writer, or sorry, you find an artist who can create really expressive faces, right? A lot of comic books that I read, sometimes, the action is really good. The face work is really limited, right? And for whatever reason with art, especially in graphic novels and comic books and things, I think it may be a time issue, in terms of having to get the pages done. So sometimes you just kind of keep expressions pretty minimal, right? But there are also other novelists that, or artists that focus more on facial work, and her facial work was some of the best facial work I've ever seen. Not to take away that cemetery, that opening in the cemetery is unbelievably good. So even with environments and like conceptualizing pages, even, right? Like how the panels look and how the panels flow. So all of those things in terms of her concepts, her story design, and how she does her work, amazing. But the faces are even better. So when you can draw an expressive face like she does, then you can do all the things that you're saying. You can kind of do less is more, right? Because the character will be very expressive. You can see it in the eyes. You can see it in the face. How she also positions the bodies, in terms of perspectives and everything, really, really well done. So that, especially if you look at that top panel there with the light, how she's digging, and then the character of John is kind of there at the frame. Some of these just ideas of flow, so smart, so good. And Eva de la Cruz does the color, and she's kind of a rock star in her right as well. Has done a ton of work with all the big publishers, Marvel,
right,
DC. So she's been on so many projects. Has been nominated for awards, and so the color work here even helps to create that mood of dark. But yeah, the expressions, and a lot of it too is in the writing. I wanted this idea of revenge for this character. She is collecting certain things in order to create a demon blade. And so the plot itself also helps to put the character in a situation as she's moving from point A to point B, right? So gathering all of the resources, finding people that are going to support and help her along the way. And with magic, it helps it even more. There's a particular scene where a character that is kind of one of these head mages that is broken off from the circle, that's a part of the rebel group, because there's also a rebel group. You always have to have rebel groups, man. I mean, if anything is ever, if you've seen any show, there's always, a secondary oppressed rebel group to the main group. It's part of the storytelling. So the rebel group is helping her get the items, things that she needs. And there's a particular scene where, because she can't speak, the leader of this rebel group has a particular spell and can actually kind of go into her mind and hear the thoughts, so that, then we create, like you're saying, another mechanism of how Dorothy is now speaking through the thoughts of another person, right? So now it's kind of like taking that mechanical concept to a whole other level. It's like, okay, now we're hearing her voice through another person, so that's how you can do it, right? With concept, with the art and the color, like all of those things help to move her through, even though there's not a lot of quote unquote actual speaking that she has.
Yeah, and that was one of the things, like, I just happened to be scrolling through it. So on page 22, there's a scene where she needs to communicate with somebody, and they don't have that spell. So she's just this woman who's not speaking, and she busts out a pad, and she, scrambles, and she shows people. And I really appreciated that, because I have a couple of friends who are deaf and hard of hearing, and sometimes the way that they get stuff out, I mean, we're 70 years more advanced, so for them it's a cell phone and just sometimes. But the way that, because of her condition, the way that she has to tactily navigate that, I really liked it, because you're doing things where normally, you do this word bubble if someone was speaking, you'd be like, all right, cool, so they want to do this, and they are doing that, and they're asking about this. But because it's a written medium, she's literally holding this up, and you're seeing what she's writing, and that is her, effectively, her word bubble. So it was just a fun sort of play on it. And another big shout out towards the coloring. So it was De La Cruz was the last name. Was it Emily?
Eva De La Cruz. That's her first name. Yeah, Eva.
Eva De La Cruz. Because we saw the coloring for that cemetery earlier. Would you mind if I showed the 22nd page, which is where she has that? Cool.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, do it.
Because you mentioned earlier about how coloring helps create this very moody and dark sort of atmosphere.
Correct.
Well, we're using blue, right? That is not like a dark, eerie color necessarily, but the way that it's done in combination with the line work, the stippling on the shadows,
correct,
and the different sort of hues, it does such a good job at, like you said, keeping it very moody and dark without just being like this black and gray and brown book. Because like throughout, there's so much color in this, and it's beautiful. I just appreciated that.
Well, and shout out to the letterer on this book, Maria Leticia Mirabella. She's really, really good too. The work that she put in, the concept of the handwritten words on that pad there. It's these little details. I mean, it's kind of like letterer nerd 101. And I like that you appreciate it, because when you sit down and you try to conceptualize, it's like, well, how many ways can her voice come out? Okay, let's write it on a pad. Okay, her voice is gonna come out through the mind of another person. Okay, her voice, and we just kind of set out to do this really in-depth review of how comic books work, and try to push those limits a little bit, push those boundaries, so that as a reader, you just, hopefully, like you're saying, you could become a little bit more engaged. And I think it does, hopefully it will create a little bit of a heightened experience for a reader. And it sounds like it did for you. So hopefully it sounds like it's working. That's good.
I 100% think it is. Like for me, once you sent it through, you sent that initial email with the press package, the preview stuff, right? So I saw a couple pages. I was like, this is like solid art, and like it was fun. Like from the pages I got, was good. And then you sent through the preview copy, and I was like, well, I should read this to be able to do this and know what I'm talking about. And I started reading it, and it's 96, 94
96.
pages.
Yeah,
Um,
96.
no, 96. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I found like once I'd gotten the initial scene in the cemetery, it was like, well, all right, what happens next? And what happens next? And it just kind of kept going. Where normally I like to take books a handful of pages at a time, really look at the art, really break it down. And for me, I was just like, and all of a sudden I'm at the end and I'm like, okay, well, all right. So yes, absolutely. The way that you're playing with the medium and the way that you're helping the characters communicate, awesome. Um, One thing I did want to ask, the way that you mentioned it earlier, you talked about how your creative team, in particular Elizabeth, sort of set up the panel work and things like that. So sometimes when someone writes a comic book, they have a very particular picture in mind. They know what they want things to look like and where they want them to be. And other times, on the opposite end of that scale, they're like, I don't know, just people. So I guess my question for you is, how much creative control of the visual end of the novel did you give your creative team? And how much of it were you like, this is the way it needs to be for the scene? Or were you sort of like, everything must be like this?
Yeah, I think it's a 50-50 situation with me. Um, I do write, you're spot on. Some writers are really in depth, some aren't. Um, I like to go panel to panel when I write, so I do give a little detail. Sometimes I have no detail. I think there are particular issues because I have a background working in film and I've directed
Hmm.
in a visual medium and I've written in visual mediums. I think there are just some things that I already see, and so it's really easy for me to put them out there.
Oh,
I think
cool.
the
Right on.
best, yeah, I think the best thing you can do for an artist in this medium, if I had to give any advice for anyone, is to you setting the mood. I think is helpful. You know,
Mm.
um, I think you can do that with a couple of adjectives. You don't have to go completely in depth. Um, One of the funniest things, the the Watchmen, the old
Yep.
'70s book, when you see his, you just go online and look up, his way of writing, and you're gonna see that he does like a panel to panel, but one panel is an entire page. Okay, so he does a stream of
Ooh.
consciousness. Yeah, he writes sort of stream of consciousness, and it's very interesting to see that as like an opposite end of the spectrum, to someone, and he was constantly late on pages. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
the
Well,
the
yeah.
in-depthness, the in-depth of like how he's going about everything. It's intense, to read that as an artist and then to kind of take out what he's saying. So I think it's yeah. If you look at Alan Moore's, that's just panel one,
That's panel one.
that's panel one, right? So it's pretty intense, right? You see that, and he's very successful. He's made a lot of money. He's sold a lot of projects. He's really good at what he does. So his concepts work, right? So it's proven, and so I feel like writers have to have some detail. I will agree with that.
Mm.
There are certain scenes, I think, where maybe there's a lot of dialogue heavy stuff, and you're going from like one shots, two shots, and it's just through the environment in a conversation. I will
Hmm.
almost always leave those open, unless I feel like a character needs to move somewhere to get to a plot point within that environment.
Yeah.
But most of the times, like the perfect example is the cemetery shot of that first page. I need to tell the artist what cemetery we're in. I need to tell them what the mood is. There are plot points like that smog that you're talking about. So you need to
Yep.
describe the smog. They need to understand, in this particular case, the gothic nature of what we're trying to accomplish with this scene, because if you don't really establish that relationship with the artist, in terms of, hey, we want to go gothic with this, then they may not go that direction. So you definitely have to kind of keep pushing, how you're seeing the book visually even if it's a few adjectives or just a few sentences, I definitely do give detail for sure.
Nice. All right. And I mean, clearly it pays off. Although I must admit, seeing Alan Moore's massive stream of consciousness,
Yeah.
woof. I did want to mention real quick over on Instagram, at Handle Without Care asks two questions. One, does Levi have a fave part of the graphic novel? And then it's kind of like being a director, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I do have some favorite parts. Yeah. There's, sometimes things really, really work when you put them on the page and then the team pulls them together, whether it be collaboration. Elizabeth really understood the assignment with a lot of it, and there were a few times where we would sit back and we would collaborate even on some of the flow, even after we kind of, she would put the thumbnails out there and then we would flow together, sometimes like, hey, what if we tried this, what if we tried that? There's two things in the book that I'll mention without giving spoilers. Because we're doing a film about magic, we had to have familiars. Okay. And familiars, if you're not aware in this world, familiars are basically animals that a wizard or a magician or whatever can take control over, like they can see from their eyes, or they can kind of they can get in their body and kind of puppeteer where they're going or what they're doing, or they can read their thoughts, see their minds. These familiars, and there are a few familiars and scenes in the book with the familiars where the design, we really wanted to see POV from animals and like involve animals. Really that stuff. Love that stuff. I'm a huge animal fan. I love dogs, cats, animals. And so being able to have them have a voice in the book and see how they see the world, we really wanted the reader to see how they see the world. So the panels are just a completely different design, completely colored, completely different. We really researched how does this animal see the world? How does this animal see the world?
Oh, really?
And
Cool.
we wanted to have different ways that you could visually see that as a reader. And then there was a scene towards the end where we do this like double page spread of a ritual that takes place towards the end of the book, and that came out so well. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback from reviewers and people who have got advanced copies that have taken a look at that, and everybody kind of agrees, including the artists, the contributors that made the art. That that was a really fun one that we really loved doing.
Well, I will say, like, again, it happens to be on page, I guess it's page 73 and 74, or maybe 74, 75, depending on how it's split. In the digital document, it just says 74 or 73.
Right.
I don't really want to show it because it's so deep in the book, but I will say, for the folks out there who, one, just go on Amazon, look up Order of the Circle, pre-order it, and 6 days, on the 18th, you'll get it. And then you yourself can go and check this out. Often I find when you get a splash page, it is, sort of, it has a singular focal point, right? So it's usually in the center, and it's usually like a big fight, and then there's like 1,000 other dudes around. Often it's superhero books, so they're all dudes wearing tights. But the focus is like here. What I personally appreciated about that page was the focus was the center, but because the way it's laid out, it's a long set of focus, and it's sort of not broad. It's surrounded by panels, and it just wants to draw you in. And the shape of those panels is very pleasing. So yeah, it's just really cool to see. Again, folks, go and get the book. It's awesome. Get it on Amazon. I think in Canadian dollars, $11.50 for Kindle, $22.99 for paperback.
Mm-hmm.
Don't quote me on that though, especially if you're not.
I think
Canada.
you're right. I think you're right.
Sounds right. But yeah, I wanted to mention too, like, about the familiars. One of them in the book, a little spoiler, It's named Merlin, and I think that's genius and funny and smart.
I mean, yeah, we're playing on this whole wizard thing, so yeah, you
Yeah,
gotta. That's the little. It's a little rat. It's a little familiar rat.
and yeah, like I appreciated the like his. Do you mind if I show the 54th page?
Yeah, go ahead. I think
Cool.
it's great.
I agree. So we can see here the person controlling Merlin, and then Merlin doing his thing, but this like fish eye crazy. I just that's so cool, and again, I appreciate that you took the time to do the research into how that would actually look, how the creature would see. The fact that the coloring in it is not what we see, but what it sees.
Correct.
That's just cool.
It is. Thank you.
Yeah,
This is
I don't really have a
this is one
question.
of my favorite pages. Yeah, no. And if you look real close, you see the sort of like bent 360 sort of things, and then where the Merlin is there in the center, it's like an eye, right? So you're
Yeah.
creating like right in the center of the page, like an eye, because he's seeing, and then you're creating these. It's just it's really clever, well designed, and this was another one of those collaboration pages with Elizabeth, and the colorist also sort of understanding the assignment here, because the scene itself had to have a certain color tone, okay, and then the eye, as the way the rat is seeing, has to have a certain color tone, because they're only seeing in like grays. They have like a grayscale, right? And so with the color of the scene, there's sort of like these muted browns, and then we get into that grayscale, but they're within the same sort of, I think, color family, right? So if you were to look at,
Oh, okay.
what the gray and the brown would be in the same hues, right? And so you're able to it not to become so disturbing to the eye to flip,
Hmm.
back and forth. And so it really, really smart on the color level as well, to be able to kind of make it blend well with the page. So this is probably one of my favorite pages of the book.
It it is so cool, um, and it's just cute. Like it's straight up, it's just cute. Merlin's kind of a cute character. Um, yeah, like it's one of those things where I will say you've done a very good job at building this world, and the creative team has done a very good job of rendering it for us to be able to enjoy it. Um, because I find myself having questions about all of these characters,
Good.
um, and sort of wanting to see what happens next. Where do they go? Why? How'd they get where they are when we meet them in this book? So it is very exciting to hear that there are two more planned, and sort of the goal is to do two more at least. Um, I guess when like we're about 12 minutes left in the show.
Mm.
Um, is there anything when writing this that became a challenge that you didn't think would be a challenge?
Yeah, I think when things, it's always a challenge to put a project like this together. It's I that the project kind of spoke for itself. To kind of add a little ego to that, a little bit, because I felt like putting the team together, we, I knew kind of who I wanted, and as we were adding on names and getting people, the project, I just sent it to them. You read through it, you're excited about it, you want to do it, and putting the team together was probably one of the easier parts of this, and really, I think conceptualizing it, writing it, that was probably the hardest part. The challenge of it, I think, especially when working with a publisher and as a newer writer, the publisher gave really good notes. And
Oh, right
so
on.
the challenge too was to come back and write a couple of sections, because, some of it wasn't working. And it was really good to work with Anna, the editor. She gave some really good feedback on some of the sections. So really, I think
Okay.
just the writing and the conceptualizing was probably the most difficult part. If you asked the artist or the colorist, or the letterer, they'd probably say other elements, of course,
Yeah,
maybe
of course, yeah.
within their own department. I think that's probably the good thing about sitting back, is the relationship with everybody was really nice and smooth. It's good to work on a project that people are excited to work on, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And keep things, moving through, and uh, everybody was contributing at such a high level that all that part of it was just really, really easy.
Awesome. That's fantastic to hear. Like I said when we started, you are very excited about this, and that makes me happy. And the fact that when working on it, everyone was like, "All right, yeah, let's do this. Like, this is going to be fun. This will be interesting," and they were willing to work with you and sort of brainstorm, come up with ideas, and you guys were able to play back and forth with how to set things up. That's awesome. Like that's the kind of stuff where I think while you're doing the creating, that can absolutely impact how good the final product is.
Yeah,
And
for
if
sure.
anything else, make it better.
Yeah.
Um, now, a bit of an odd one for you, Levi. This is not from me. Ben has come back with, do either of you have any beard advice?
I mean, you have to be able
Go
to
for it.
grow facial hair first. I mean, that if you
Oh,
can't grow facial hair, then you shouldn't try. Just don't do it.
yeah, unfortunately, I do have to agree with that. If you can, my one true piece of beard advice: leave this alone. All
Nice.
the under neck stuff, leave it alone because that's how it gets to look big.
Yeah.
And then after that, keep this clean, I guess.
Mm.
There was a picture I have, and it's on my social media. It's out there on at Wednesday Night Reviews at WNR. A number of years ago, sort of at the tail end of the pandemic, my friends were very kind. They got together because I go to Fan Expo Canada every year, and so they kind of splurged for me and bought me tickets to see Jim Lee. And he, signs a couple things, and I got to ask him a
Cool.
question, which was cool.
That's cool.
Um, yeah, and I took a picture with him, and there's this picture of me with Jim Lee, who's a lot smaller than I thought he'd be. But I mean, it is what it is. I'm a big guy. But I have this beard that is like this, and it
Mm.
looks a little ridiculous. So yeah, let this grow, keep this trimmed, you're good. Um,
Perfect.
now, Levi, we've got like 7 minutes left. Is there anything else about the Order of the Circle that you want people to know that we haven't touched on?
You know, some inspirations, maybe. Just
Yeah,
if you
go
like
for it.
this, you like that. We when we're coming up with the concept ideas, one of the big inspirations for this, the Supernatural TV series. If you liked that show, or like the
Oh yeah, I
ethos,
see
like
that.
how they deal with the ethos. In this particular story, the Order of the Circle, heaven and hell are real. Much like they are in that story. I
Mhm.
felt like, with that concept, there's more weight, right? So your actions have a lot more weight to whether or not you're going to the good place or the bad place, right? And
Mhm.
and I think ultimately, as a person on this planet, in a fantasy world or in a real world or whatever, if that was an actual thing that existed, I think it would change the way you think about life, right? It would
Oh
change
my God,
how
wouldn't it?
you interact, how you conduct yourself. If you want to go there, then there's a route. If you want to go here, there's a route. And I think ultimately, then there's the gray area where the Order of the Circle and the actual circle within the story manipulate, right? That's where
Yeah.
the game is played, is in that gray area, how oppressive they can be, or how they can manipulate the rules to send you down a path, right? They can put you to hell,
Mhm.
they can do these things. And so I think that's where, as the reader, I think the Supernatural TV series kind of is similar in that regard. As far as like historical fictions, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen,
Oh,
this idea that these figures exist in time. I think there's a similar vibe with that. I definitely love that
right on.
concept. Um, and ultimately, there is a very significant Gothic sort of nature to this. I know when we were talking about the familiars, there's definitely a cute aspect to that, but the majority of this book is fairly dark,
Hmm.
and there's gore. I think the grim fairy tales kind of have a similar vibe to this. When
Mm.
you look at those types of stories, there's always really a dark moral, but it almost is surrounded around real feeling, real type people, right? Like real
Yep.
concepts, and then you got this gore, you got this idea, and then there's that fantasy aspect. I think there's some similarities there. So, if you like those things, I think you may connect with this story.
Beautiful. And as you were saying that, my brain, like the supernatural bit, absolutely. Just the way that the story sort of unfolds and how it feels. Totally see that. Brothers Grimm, definitely. Um, yeah, folks, if you're into any of that stuff, you've got to check this out. Again, go on Amazon, look up The Order of the Circle. It's coming across the screen right now. And get the book. Pre-order it. It'll come out on the 18th. You can get your paperback. We'll ship it to you. Or you can get your Kindle copy, whatever works for you. Um, then I guess with the last couple of minutes, Levi, I always like to ask a question because we've talked in depth about this book and your creative process and all that good stuff, which I love. But I also like to let people know a little bit about you. Um, so often I find folks who create comics often read comics, collect comics. And if you collect comics, like myself, you're often a nerd and you do other nerdy things like maybe play magic or collect stamps or whatever. Um, so I guess my question is, Levi, of whatever it is that you collect, of all the things that you have, like posters on the wall behind you, what is the thing that you have that maybe not the most valuable, maybe not the most rare, but the thing that makes you the most happy?
Yeah. As far as like hobbies, I mean, I'm a gamer. I think
Right on.
games are probably the most important to me. Being able to uh, do those stories, some of the stories in
Hmm.
games are really fun, really nice. I like to be immersed there. I like to do that. I also like to play, you know, first person shooters. I like to play Halo. I like to play Call of Duty. I like to do all that. It's a great way to kind of off gas, let go of
Mm.
what's going on in the world and just kind of hang out. I've got a group of friends. We've been hanging out since Halo LAN parties way back in the day. And, it's
Oh,
always good to connect with them and stay connected with them. So, as far as like collecting, I've collected baseball cards.
right on.
I do collect some comic books, but I'm more into uh, I'm not into sort of classic Marvel DC. That's not really my style.
Yeah.
I enjoy Scott Snyder, Jeff Lemire, um,
Oh,
uh, Vaughn. The Saga series, is really really good. So, I think I'm more I gravitate more towards storytelling over the superhero concepts, right? I mean, I enjoy
hmm,
superhero books, but I think my heart is more in storytelling in the modern sense in that way. I think I read more X-Men and GI Joe way back in the day.
right on.
X-Men was something I enjoyed. I've collected a couple of those books, but yeah, I'm more about gaming.
Right on. And like you said, the immersive experience. And I
Yeah,
couldn't agree more. Like to this day, I will choose a solid single player offline game with a hell of a story over just about anything.
right.
Um, and then I found like the polar opposite. As long as I've got a good group of friends, for whatever reason, for me it'll be Call of Duty or Overwatch at the moment.
Overwatching.
As long as there's a couple of my buddies, jump in, play, have a good time, crack some jokes, have fun. Um, so thank you, Levi, and Levi, absolutely. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show tonight.
Thank you so much. I was really, really appreciative of this opportunity. Had a great time. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, absolutely, folks out there, whether you're joining us now in YouTube land or you're watching this sometime in the future, one, go to Amazon, look up The Order of the Circle, get your copy. You'll enjoy it greatly. 96-page book, wicked. If and when you're done that, go follow Levi everywhere you can. Levi, where can the people follow you? What's the best way?
Instagram right now is really where I am. So IG is good. You can get all the news, all the information, even some more information, if and when we kind of get book two. Book two is we're working on it. So, it is something that we're looking to release, but let's get this first one out. Let's make people happy. Let's entertain these people and get them excited about number two.
Perfect. You heard him here. Go get the first one, enjoy it, sell it so much that the company is just gonna greenlight number two and get it done.
Very good.
And Levi, it was an absolute joy having you on. I will gladly have you on for the next one. And until then, I will see you next time.
Thank you, Konrad.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day. Yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns. Can't find issue 2? Nah, collector problems, cliffhangers, mysteries. You need answers.